Estudiantes, ahora tenemos otra actividad que tiene que ver con el encuentro cultural. Entonces tenemos más información sobre la cultura hispánica. You've already read through these two pages. Son las páginas 16 y 17 en el libro de texto. And you were to learn all of these important facts about Hispanic culture, and it obviously comes from Europe, from Spain, and also from Central and Latin America. And so the question is, how much have you retained? So now that you've read through and learned that material, you just want to go ahead and review that. So don't be looking at your book, don't be looking at your notes. Now's the time to review and see how much you've learned about each of these different parts. So first of all, as you think about the world as a whole, if someone were to ask you, so how many do speak Spanish? And you would be able to say, oh, there are about 300 and how many? Right, 330 million Spanish speakers in the world. And isn't that the most predominant language, or is there another? That's right, you'd also remember, oh, but wait, we also have the Chinese, Mandarin. That's well over 1 billion. Oh, great, important thing to know. Another question someone might ask you, how many countries are there that speak Spanish? I'm thinking of English, and I have the U.S. and Canada, and, well, there's Australia and England. You go and name the English-speaking countries. The question is, how many Spanish-speaking countries? And you would be able to tell them, well, there are, don't look down. That's right, there are 21. They say, well, where are they? And you could rattle them off. You've got 1 in Europe, and 3 in the Caribbean, 9 in South America, 6 in Central America, and 1 in North America. And don't forget our Hispanic country in Africa, Guinea Equatorial. Good. Then you also could answer the question about, well, what other languages have influenced Spanish? Now, the big influence, of course, was Latin, and as the Romans moved into that area, into the peninsula, then, of course, they brought Latin with them, and so that's, in essence, what we have is Spanish is the Latin version that was spoken and developed there in the Iberian Peninsula. And then you can also talk Greek, of course, influenced that, and also we also have the Basque language, Euskera, those kinds of things that also impacted it. Now we also have the Moorish tradition, the influence of the Moors that invaded Spain. Do you remember what year they invaded Spain? This is from northern Africa. They came in 7-Eleven. Anybody that's lived out west before know we have those quick stops like the pantries and 7-Elevens. So now you can remember that. Then we also have a year where we say, okay, all of this was over and the Moorish influence was expelled out of the country, and that would have been 1492. An interesting year, right? So, why don't we just talk about that? This is the Lugares Mágicos segment, and you have that people that had populated that area, and it talks about a particular place and a palace there. What was the name of that place? La Alhambra. That's right. Clase, La Alhambra. Muy bien, La Alhambra. Now, the years that that was being built, that was in the 1300s, right? So again, 1492, when the Moors were pushed out of Spain. If you have that influence for that time, you would note it in the building. That's exactly what happens when you go there. You see that style throughout southern Spain in many of the buildings. And it reminds me, one of the questions was, well, do you see this in your other, in your community? And I think about our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. If you've visited and you look at the Washington Monument, you notice that there's a difference in the stone color, and you'll know it's because of the Civil War and the impact that that had, and then the source of the stone was different, so that's why you have that change. And that's kind of a similar thing. You can see buildings in the south of Spain that have one particular motif, an architectural motif. There's a certain look, and then as you go up a layer, you have a different look. Those kinds of things. Sometimes they were torn down, sometimes just add on, and we're going to put our own influence on that. So very interesting. Another thing about La Alhambra, you'll know Washington Irving, famous writer. He wrote such things, American writer. He wrote things like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, as well as Tales of the Alhambra. And that's, he in fact lived there for a while, got permission to live there in the Alhambra, and did some writing there. Now, about notable persons, las personas notables, tenemos una persona, una figura importante. Como para los Estados Unidos, George Washington es una persona notable. Para mucho de Sudamérica, esta persona es muy importante. Now, you caught some of those words, right? You should start to be able to listen and understand the cognates that we use, things like importante. Obviously, you heard some English in there, and you're wanting to start to deal with chunks of sound and be able to say, oh, I get some of those words, and I'm okay with that. So with this segment of the Encuentro Cultural, who was that famous person? What was his name? Muy bien, Simón Bolívar. Fantástico. Clase, Simón Bolívar. And someone might ask you, where was he born? When was he born? Who is this person? What was his nickname? So, what would you say? Where was he born? España? Colombia? No, Venezuela, ¿verdad? Caracas, Venezuela. Roughly what year? This is the 1800s, the 1900s, 1700s, late 1700s. Well, yeah, it was 1781. And born in Caracas, and he played a major role in independence for how many countries? What do you remember? That's right, 5 countries. Obviously Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, y el Ecuador. Now, he, do you remember what year he died? Did he live 100 years? 50? How many? That's right, 1830 in Colombia. And so he fought, he was a general in the War for Independence. That was in the 20s. Okay. And his nickname? Muy bien, El Gran Libertador. El Gran Libertador. What else? Teotihuacan. Talk about that for a bit. Where... If someone says, oh, I need to go see Teotihuacan, you would know that they are going to Mexico. That's right. And it's a very large complex. Now, what does Teotihuacan, somebody might ask you, what does Teotihuacan mean? Remember that? The place where men became gods. That's an interesting name, Teotihuacan. So it's that complex of pyramids there in Mexico. Oh, okay, you read that. What else? What else? Let's talk just briefly the ritmos y música section. So some information on the Cuban rhythms, and you've probably heard some of those things, and you can go out and listen to that. There's an iTunes playlist. If you want to, you can listen to at least parts of those. You could go out and listen to parts of those songs and say, oh yeah, I know that rhythm. And you see that it's, as it explains, it's a mix of different cultures, and there's a fair amount of religion in all of these things, and folk stories and those kinds of things. So I think that should cover it. Well, hopefully you have a fair amount of this culture now. You've got a handle on it. You learned it, and you're able to talk about it and gain a better sense of the expanse of the Hispanic world and its influence in some years and some people that are involved in the culture. You should have a very good foundational knowledge of your own culture. Who are the important figures and some important dates and places, tourist places, music, those kinds of things. That's our purpose for the Encuentro Cultural.